One of the relatively few changes made between Overwatch 1 and Overwatch 2 was to its monetization model. In the old days, you got new cosmetics in one of three ways. You earned a loot box, you bought a loot box, or you used a pity currency to unlock the things you wanted when the first two ways didn't work. When Overwatch 2 came out, the system changed dramatically. There's now a premium currency that can be purchased directly in a rotating shop on top of the old pity currency. You can also use that premium currency to buy a battle pass that'll last 9 weeks, giving you access to about a half dozen extra skins compared to the free battle pass, including a mythic skin at the very end. And look, there have been a lot of critiques of both models of monetization. I think they're both shit for reasons I talked about a year ago now in my video about Overwatch's monetization, but there's a specific issue with the new model I want to talk about today. See, the old model, for all of its many flaws, was still a bit of an equalizer. There were only a handful of cosmetics that were directly connected to something you spent money on. Pink Mercy, Origins Edition skins, etc. Sure, you could spend money on loot boxes, but there was no guarantee that spending X amount of dollars was going to get you Witch Mercy in Halloween 2017, and many people who got it from a free loot box just from leveling up. As a result, you might think, damn, that person has a cool skin, but you couldn't make any sort of inference about wealth from it. If you look at loot boxes as gambling, which to be clear they are, then rich people certainly get to play the game more if they want to, but their odds of winning any individual game don't actually go up. Somebody winning the jackpot at the slots might be a rich person before they won, but they could also just be some random guy who played a game and got stupidly lucky. That's not how Overwatch works anymore though. If you see someone with Lilith Moira, you know they dropped $40 or 55 Canadian on the Ultimate Battle Pass bundle, and that changes how you perceive them. Overwatch 2's cosmetics have created a culture of classism that's only becoming more and more noticeable over time, with both the shop cosmetics and Battle Pass cosmetics creating hard-to-ignore implications about both the amount of money and amount of free time people have to burn on this game that's made all the more noticeable by the current cost of living crisis and the rough state of the economy. Before we start, quick channel updates. First, this video is a member's choice video. Each month my channel members get to vote for a single video they want me to make, with this one barely winning on its 4th attempt by a single vote. That is to say, every vote counts. These are going to be next month's topics, with 3 returning topics and 2 brand new ones as decided by top donors from the Donathon back in October. If you're interested in learning a little bit more about them, be sure to stick around until the end and I'll go over them in more detail. And if you'd like to potentially cast that deciding vote, you can get a membership for $5 a month by clicking the join button below. Next, as part of those Donathon rewards, I'm doing a special Just Dance stream tonight, assuming you're watching this on Black Friday, that is. You can find that over on Twitch at twitch.tv/thevivaros if you like the idea of watching me struggle. And if I don't get copyright claimed into oblivion, you'll be able to find the VOD of it over at youtube.com/thevivarosvods on Saturday. Links to both are down below. Last thing, I promise, next week I'll also be doing some more Donathon rewards. I'll be putting out a channel review plus Q&A video on Friday, December 1st, so if you have any questions, be sure to let me know in the comments or in the Discord server. And that'll be followed by a community game night stream on Twitch. We'll be playing Mario Kart 8, Crab Game, King of the Castle, and probably some more, depends on how much time we go for. And you are all welcome to come join. Alright. With all that out of the way, let's get into the actual topic. Part 1. What are cosmetics and/or classism? As usual for this channel, let's start out by defining some terms and establishing the foundation of the topic. For the 5 people who watch me but don't play Overwatch or any other games that use this model, cosmetics in this context refers to cosmetic in-game content. That is to say, content that affects how a game looks in some way but not how it plays. In Overwatch, cosmetics take a bunch of different forms, including skins, highlight intros, emotes, victory poses, weapon charms, souvenirs, voice lines, sprays, and golden guns, which can come in one of 5 rarity tiers: common, rare, epic, legendary, and mythic. Golden guns, sprays, and voice lines are usually rated as common, while victory poses, player icons, and player cards are typically rare, and highlight intros, emotes, weapon charms, and souvenirs are all typically epic. There are some exceptions to this. Like, Zarya's mystery gift emote is a legendary, and Kiriko's tarot reading voice line is rare, but that's generally the rule of how things work. Originally, this rarity system was used to determine drop rates in Overwatch 1's loot boxes, but now they primarily exist just as a pricing mechanism, and if we're being honest, it's really all about the skins. Skins are equipable content that changes how a character looks, ranging from relatively minor palette swaps for rare skins, dramatic color swaps, and minor accessorizing for epic skins, total overhauls to appearance that affect the silhouette as well as occasionally adding new contextual voice lines for legendary skins, and customizable skins with mix and match parts, colors, and effects for mythics. In Overwatch 1, cosmetics were unlocked both directly and indirectly through loot boxes. Every time you leveled up, you'd get a free loot box with the option to buy more loot boxes with cash whenever you wanted, with each containing 4 mostly random cosmetics. I say mostly random because there were a couple fingers on the scale. For example, you were always guaranteed to get at least one cosmetic that was rare or better, and after the first year, Overwatch started only providing duplicates at certain tiers once you'd already unlocked everything else from that tier, so you were less likely to get screwed over by bad RNG. Back in the old days, you might get 3 of a skin you didn't want, while the system just refused to give you the one you really did want. Everyone who played in that first year and really grinded for skins during an event knows that feeling. Duplicates did still give you pity credits though, and that was the indirect way of unlocking cosmetics through loot boxes. You could use those credits to buy any cosmetic you wanted, meaning that even if you couldn't get lucky enough to roll for the skin you wanted, you could still eventually get it if you brute forced it. Every hero, whether part of the original roster or added later as DLC, also had a standard number of base cosmetics. 3 highlight intros, 4 to 5 emotes, 3 victory poses, 10-ish voice lines, 30-ish sprays, and a gold gun. Oh, and obviously skins. Duh, you'd usually get 4 rare ones, 2 epic ones, and 4 legendaries. Overwatch 1 used to also have event-specific cosmetics that would only be available for the 3 to 4 weeks when the event was running, but with the release of Overwatch 2, almost all event cosmetics from Overwatch 1 are now just treated as base cosmetics and can be unlocked with the pity credits year-round. Weapon charms and souvenirs were added as new cosmetic types in Overwatch 2 alongside a new premium currency. It's important to make a distinction between free/earnable currencies like the pity credits or competitive tokens, which can only be earned, not bought, versus premium currencies like the Overwatch League tokens and Overwatch coins that can be bought directly. New heroes also no longer receive as many base cosmetics, most noticeably when it comes to legendary skins, being cut from 4 in Overwatch 1 to just 2 in Overwatch 2. Overwatch 2 abandoned the loot box model and replaced it with the Battle Pass and Premium Shop, and while the Battle Pass does have a free track, most of the cosmetics, including the newly introduced mythic tier of skins, are restricted to the paid track, which costs about $10 every 9 weeks. For the first year of Overwatch, the shop was exclusively premium, with cosmetics only being purchasable with the premium currencies. Recently, certain cosmetics have been added as anniversary cosmetics for events for purchase with the pity credits, although those are pretty limited. Pity credits are unlocked through the Battle Pass's free tier, with about 2,000 available if you complete the entire Battle Pass. Now, the other important term to define is classism, and thankfully, it's relatively straightforward. It's just prejudice in favor of or against someone on the basis of class, which in this context means socioeconomic class. Are you upper class, middle class, or lower class? Are you part of the bourgeoisie or the proletariat? How are you treated socially, economically, culturally, and politically as a consequence? Class is one of those things that affects every aspect of our lives, but which we don't really like to talk about, and that reflects how we think about it. Namely, that we don't like to think about it, even though it's everywhere. A really simple example of this is overdraft fees. We wouldn't usually use the term classism for it, but it is a classist policy that many banks have where you'll get charged a penalty if you try to spend more than you have, in effect penalizing you for being poor. Like they could just reject the transaction. We have the technology, but they penalize you for it anyways. It's a tax on poverty. Sometimes classism is more overt and borderline funny. A politician hosting a $1,700 dinner to discuss the cost of living crisis is funny, but it is also deliberately discriminating against the people hit hardest by that crisis and explicitly not allowing anyone who isn't at least solidly upper middle class to attend. Other times it's more indirect, such as in the Boots theory put forward by Terry Pratchett in his Discworld series. Take Boots, for example. A man who could afford $50 had a pair of boots that'd still be keeping his feet dry in 10 years' time, while a poor man who could only afford cheap boots would have spent $100 on boots in the same time and would still have wet feet. Classism is everywhere, affecting everything from the places you can live, to the clothes you can wear, to the food you can eat. And because it's everywhere, it's also very intersectional. Gender affects your relationship to class, as does race, as does sexuality, as does disability. There are different expectations placed on different people for performing their class quote-unquote appropriately, and it is a complicated topic as a consequence. Again, I want to reiterate, this is a YouTube video about Overwatch. We are not doing like 300, 400 level econ courses and political science theory, so just bear with some oversimplifications, okay? Historically, this has often also been tied more directly to the cost of producing those items. For example, the color purple has a long association with royalty and the very top of the upper class, purely because it was so rare and so expensive to produce that only the very top echelon of society could even think of affording it. As we've gotten better at producing different dyes, though, it's become less literal and more metaphorical. Purple is still associated with royalty, even though any random person can go down to Walmart and buy a $5 purple t-shirt that would have made a Habsburg fucked up jaw drop. For a long time, getting a tan was seen as a sign that you were lower class because you had to go out into the fields and work. But once commercial air travel became available and we began moving to more indoor working conditions, it swapped. Now, getting a tan is a sign that you had the money to fly to Hawaii, and being pale is a sign that you were stuck at your 9 to 5 all winter instead of snowbirding it up. This dynamic has been exacerbated in the digital era for 2 main reasons. First, corporations have the computing power and access to data to fine-tune how much money they think they can screw out of you. And second, we now have digital products that can be produced a single time and then infinitely sold without any additional cost. If I want a Gucci bag, I need someone to manufacture that Gucci bag and sell it to me. But if I want a Fortnite skin, all I need to do is give the company money so I can get access to the thing that already exists and can exist an infinite number of times for an infinite number of people. And in theory, that should have changed a lot about how we handle products. In practice, though, it didn't. Part 2. The old ways, but somehow worse. The biggest difference between physical and digital goods that we need to get out of the way right now is that digital goods are not tangibly real at any point. So in theory, it actually does kind of make sense to distribute them in more of a randomized gotcha way. Obviously, in the real world, we don't do that. We'd only walk up to Simon's, throw a purple plastic $10 bill on the counter, and maybe walk away with a Louis Vuitton belt, but probably walk away with a pair of cheap socks, because that would be an insane way to run a business. It costs money to rent space or physical inventory in a storefront, for staff to work there, and for someone to actually manufacture each iteration of the product. You have to pay for raw materials, you have to pay for labor, you have to pay for transportation. Like, there's a cost to the product existing in that way. Digital products aren't like that. You don't need to order 100 units of the latest Lucio Overwatch skin to be manufactured in a sweatshop in Vietnam, pay a shipping company to get them to you, pray they don't get stuck somewhere, find a warehouse to store them, and then pay people to man the till for 16 hours a day while people wander in to buy them at their leisure. The inventory is infinite. There's no risk of retail theft or loss, and you don't have to worry about renting brick and mortar locations. If you listen to any economist from before the 1980s, or any of the dumber ones since then, you'd think that this would mean that all the costs of goods for consumers would be very, very low. After all, if there's no variable costs at all, and the fixed costs are dramatically lower than they would be for a physical product, wouldn't you expect prices to go down? The reality is, of course, that's not actually how anything works. Capitalism isn't about getting you, the customer, the best, most reasonable deal. It's about the CEO, the executives, the managers getting the best deal. It's about profit. Profit is, obviously, revenues minus expenses. You spend $5 to make $8 and you have a $3 profit. Fixed costs are things that exist regardless of the quantity of the product, such as paying like $100 for machinery to produce an infinite number of a thing. While variable costs are costs that are affected by quantity, such as paying $3 for the material for each one of those things and having to pay that $3 each time. This is, again, really, really oversimplified, but it's important to establish because it's part of why Overwatch's cosmetics were originally offered in the loot box model. Again, we don't do that in the real world, but for digital goods, it makes a lot of sense. Obviously, it takes more resources to produce a legendary skin than it does to produce a voice line, but once it's been produced, it can be infinitely sold to people without ever needing to be produced again. And by using loot boxes, companies were effectively making a slot machine where the customer can either win the pity prize or the jackpot without costing the casino a penny either way. Again, this was a bad model. It was exploitative and predatory and was only used because it made companies a shitload of money. But something it didn't do was create an explicit culture of haves and have-nots. If you played fairly regularly, you'd usually have most of the base cosmetics for all the heroes, or at least enough to have something you liked for every hero. When a new hero came out, you'd usually spend a couple weeks getting nothing but that hero's cosmetics and loot boxes because of the anti-dupe system. You'd get their sprays, their emotes, their victory poses, and most of their skins pretty quick from just playing and leveling up a bit. Duplicate items would give you currency, so if there was something specific you wanted for a new hero right away, you could also often just buy it. Even if you were a new player, you'd be able to pretty quickly amass a collection of cosmetics, primarily skins, that would allow you to blend into the crowd of other players. You weren't going to immediately stand out as either 1, a new player, or 2, a broke player. Overwatch 2 isn't like that. If you see someone in-game with Aztec Sombra or Cleric Lifeweaver or Cyber Detective Sojourn, you know they paid $20 for it. If you can afford those things, then it's not just, oh, look, we have like the same skin, we're matching. It's sending a signal to you that that person and you are part of an equal class. It's the same thing as when you're a kid and you see a bunch of cool kids in your class wearing a certain brand of shoes. If your parents buy you the same brand, then you can at least feel like you could be on par with them. There's a level of like theoretical equalizing between the two of you. But if they can't or don't, both you and the cool kids look at you as someone without the potential to be part of their circle. If you watch content creators who have the full One Punch Man collab bundle or the Perfect Knight LeSeraphim collab bundle, you're seeing the same thing only on a greater scale. Like seeing a celebrity you really like posting about the type of gaming PC they have, or their controller, or monitor, or gaming chair. Companies spend a ton of money trying to convince you that you need to buy their products to be part of the in-group, reaffirming that feeling if you do buy it and making you feel left out if you don't. Again, the old Overwatch 1 approach was flawed, I can't say that enough, but it necessarily avoided this happening because loot box cosmetics can't be exclusive to a certain class of people. Anyone can, at least in theory, get lucky and roll the best skin of the event. Being rich gives you more rolls, but there's no indicator in-game as to whether you spent the equivalent of a one-bedroom apartment's mortgage on loot boxes versus just playing pretty regularly and getting decently lucky. There was no way of knowing just from looking at you in-game how much money you'd spent on it, or if you'd spent any money on it, and as a consequence the culture of classism couldn't really exist in the same way that it does now. If every kid walking to school got to roll a pair of dice as they walked in the door to get a random clothing item, maybe a cheap pair of socks, but maybe a pair of luxury brand shoes, then you wouldn't really be able to use clothing as a metric for class and wealth because sure, maybe you bribed the school to let you roll the dice some extra times to ensure you got the best stuff, but it doesn't stop any random person from also getting the best stuff for free, removing its power as a specific symbol of class. Witch Mercy was just a signal that you had a cool skin, not that you used to have $40. It might give you FOMO if you didn't get it, but it didn't make you feel poorer than someone who did, just less lucky. That's not the case anymore. If you're wearing Marionetta Sombra or Wicked Rain Moira or Minotaur Reinhardt, we know you spent money on it. And if you're not wearing those skins, well, maybe you did spend the money and maybe you didn't. When it comes to the heroes from Overwatch 1, it's harder to tell. Like maybe you did buy Marionetta Sombra, but you just decided to use the Los Muertos skin because you prefer how it looks that day. Or maybe you did buy Minotaur Reinhardt and it's one of your favorited skins, but when you went for a randomized favorite skin, it just picked a different one. However, the issue becomes especially noticeable when it comes to the Overwatch 2 heroes. Sojourn, Junker Queen, Kiriko, Ramatra, Lifeweaver, Iliadi, and now Mauga. Sure, you get your 2,000 pity credits this season. You could always use those to buy one base legendary skin per season, so you don't have to rock up wearing the default skins, but like, those still aren't really the same, are they? Sure, Troop Commander Sojourn is a cool skin, but we all know that's one of the skins you can get for free. Cyber Detective, on the other hand, is a cool skin where we know you've spent $1 on it. Remember, a lot of trendy clothing becomes a class signifier not because it's, the coolest or feels the best or whatever. It's the association with socioeconomic class that gives it its meaning, and that very much so includes the price tag. Are Telfar bags pretty? Sure. Are they worth $500? Depends how much you value them, but I've heard good things about them, so sure. But there are plenty of bags that can do that. Telfar is also associated with a certain aesthetic, a vibe, and a certain class that makes it more desirable, especially because many people can't afford $500 for that bag. Not to mention all the times where the product is just objectively a worse experience than something that's cheaper and more accessible. People will spend a fortune to eat an overpriced, mediocre restaurant purely because of the status associated with it, especially with social media, since a single night out can be photographed and preserved as a permanent monument to your class status. They'll wear uncomfortable shoes just so you can see them in red bottoms so you know they've got money. They will spend a fortune to go to a party full of people they hate just so nobody forgets that they've got $2,000 to drop on a shitty dinner party, so clearly they're still rich and powerful enough to be worth listening to. Even if it's literally an identical product, demand changes when it's too expensive for most people to be able to afford. In 2018, Payless did a marketing stunt where they pretended to be a luxury shoe brand and sold all their typical shoes for an insane markup. And people who would have never dared to touch a Payless shoes in their lives were happy to buy the same shoe when they thought it was a $600 Bruno Palesi original. Do you think any of the people who were duped by Payless thought, damn, that's wild, but the shoes are so good. You know what, I'll keep going back and be grateful I can actually get them for $40. Of course they didn't. And it doesn't just apply to rich people who can pay $600 for Payless. It applies to everyone. When you were a kid, did you want to be the one rocking up in the 2 for $20 Payless shoes on your first day of grade 5? Or did you want to be the kid wearing Pumas or DCs or whatever the popular kids were wearing those days? Where I live, there's a million people who've never hauled anything a day in their lives and have zero interest in driving on an unpaved road who will spend 6 figures on a big jacked up truck that serves no purpose other than to flex how much money they have, even if it's like actively totally unsuited to the place where they live. Overwatch's cosmetics serve the same function, only to an even higher degree. You might buy the more expensive shoe brand because you trust the manufacturer more or love the brand, but since Overwatch skins perform identically in terms of mechanics, that's not the case there. However, you might also buy the more expensive shoe brand because you have a job interview and want to capitalize on our class's understanding of fashion to try and help yourself get the gig. And that actually is kind of something that happens to new players in Overwatch 2. Someone who's rocking up to games with the default skins and cosmetics is going to be presumed to be new and therefore bad. If you're new and you want to avoid getting flamed, you could always buy a couple skins for your mains and suddenly you blend in a whole lot more. After all, the cosmetics aren't really for you. Overwatch 2 is a first-person shooter where all you can see is the character's forearms and weapon when it comes to the skins, and while you can see the full thing in an emote or a victory pose, neither of those cosmetics have any gameplay impact either. Like, victory poses are literally after the game is over. And it's not just because it looks cool either. I mean, sure, it might, but you can go stare at it in the hero gallery all day every day regardless of whether or not you buy it. And yet, you might still want to buy it. Why? It doesn't do anything except look pretty for other people. And that is where the culture of classism comes in. Rocking up to an Overwatch game with Cyberdevil Widowmaker isn't just about you getting to have the skin, it's about showing it off to other people. Again, this is particularly true when it's one of the Overwatch 2 heroes because very few people really have any cosmetics for them, so if you have one of the $20 shop skins, it really stands out. You notice Cleric Lifeweaver or Water Warrior Sojourn or Mob Boss Junker Queen or Witch Kiriko or Biohazard Ramatra because they really stand out. They tell everyone around you that you have the expensive, exclusive, rare thing. And if you're swapping heroes mid-match like the game expects you to, then it's an opportunity to flex just how many of the expensive, exclusive, rare things you own across so many heroes. This is even more noticeable when skins come in a set, like with the LeSeraphim skin bundle. A friend gifted me the Sombra bundle, so I was really excited to get to use it, and in literally the first game I played with it, I was on a team with a Kiriko who'd also bought that bundle, and we did the little choreography emote together. But we did it without the rest of our team, because nobody else owned those skins. If you're someone who can afford the expensive skins, then seeing someone else with them makes you feel like you're part of that group. And if you can't, the game is making it very clear that you aren't part of it. But you could be. Having one of the premium skins is meant to give you the feeling of looking at all the broke boys on your team who can't afford to spend $20 on a skin and feeling like you're just a little bit better than them. I mean, come on, it's not that much money, is it? You're not that much of a broke boy, are you? And not having one of them is meant to make you feel like a broke boy so you cave and buy it. And at this point, there's a good chance you've been thinking, like, Okay, but not every cosmetic is that expensive. Why aren't you talking about the battle pass? Part 3. Time is money. The premium battle pass consists of 80 levels, starting with a free legendary skin or 2 with more handed out every 10 or so levels, culminating in a mythic skin at the end. On top of the 8 to 10 skins, you'll get sprays, emotes, victory poses, voice lines, weapon charms, and souvenirs as you work your way through it, all for the low price of $10. An absolute steal. The cosmetics in an average battle pass are worth, like, what, $300 all put together, so isn't that a refutation of this? That you can have the cosmetics without having to break the bank? Well, no. For one, I see this framing a bunch, and it's always a really stupid way of looking at it. Blizzard is the one setting its own price in a market where it has a monopoly. No one else can create an Overwatch skin and try and offer it at a lower price. No one can resell their skin and test the market, and there's no objective reasoning behind the pricing of any of these cosmetics. The Quackimari weapon charm is currently priced at 700 credits, or about $7 US. Is anyone paying $7 for that? No, of course not. But pricing it that high means you can put it in the Rubber Ducky Orisa bundle alongside a legendary skin and common spray. Say the bundle is worth $27, and then say you're discounting it by offering it for just $22. I really need everyone to stop pretending that these prices are a reflection of actual value, because that's the whole reason why they're able to create this bullshit culture of classism in the first place. The collective value of everything in the battle pass is $10, and people do treat them accordingly. Like, is Ghostly Bride Widowmaker cool? Sure. But everyone knows it's just the skin you get when you buy the battle pass, even if you don't play a single match all season. It's like the difference between getting a complimentary shirt for participating in a charity fun run versus going to the store and buying one. Are they both still shirts? Yes. Are they both possibly even made with the same material from the same manufacturer? Sure, let's say they are. But people will still see a difference between the two of them, and it will say something about you to them. Second, this framing acts like it's not that hard to actually finish a battle pass in this game. If you're paying for premium, you get a 20% XP boost, but it still takes a lot of hours to actually clear up to level 80, much less level 200 if you want one of those prestige player titles. People's understanding of class is often pretty limited to assuming there's a direct relationship between your bank account and your clout, but it's way more complicated than that. In my home province of Alberta, the oil field is a huge industry, and it's not uncommon during oil booms for a relatively young person to be able to pretty quickly make a shitload of money as a welder or a technician on the rigs. However, the work is dangerous, physically and mentally demanding, and grueling. You can't throw a stone in Alberta without hitting someone who's missed Valentine's Day with their partner, or Christmas with their family, or their kids' birthdays, hockey games, graduations, etc., because they had to be at the rigs for 60, 80, or even more hours per week, including Christmas. Like, this year, there are going to be a bunch of people who are out there in Fort Mac or in any of these other areas missing Christmas, potentially missing their kids' first Christmas. In fact, guaranteed there are going to be people missing their kids' first Christmas because they had to do this job. And sure, they get paid well, but having $500,000 after 10 years on the rigs out in Fort Mac isn't the same thing as having $500,000 in the bank account because your dad owned the oil company and then lobbied for the government to keep royalty rates low so he was able to put away some extra cash for you when you turned 18. This is part of why there are different understandings of class that go beyond just purely looking at the bank account, beyond pure wealth. Probably most famously, Marx's distinction between the bourgeoisie and the proletariat. The bourgeoisie aren't just the wealthy, but the owners. They own the buildings you rent for housing, they own the companies you have to buy groceries from, they own the gas stations where you have to fill up the cars you buy from the car dealerships they own. There are different levels of the bourgeoisie, small business owners or the petit bourgeoisie, for example, but they're all part of the class of people who don't make money from their own labor, but rather the labor of others that they're skimming off the top. The proletariat, by contrast, are the people who work for their money, people who are being paid for the work they do, whether it's in the form of an hourly wage, a salary, or on commission. The Starbucks barista who's making $55 lattes an hour and taking home $7.75 an hour is the prole, and the CEO of Starbucks is the bougie bourgeoisie buying himself a yacht with the profits he's skimming off the top. When Marx wrote this, his example was a factory owner and a factory worker. But in the words of another famous philosopher, I don't know any factory workers, or any factory owners for that matter. Obviously, our economy is a lot more complicated these days, but just like how Barbie wasn't trying to teach you 400 level feminism, I'm not here to teach you 400 level political and economic theory, so we're keeping it simple. The reason the distinction is important is because the Battle Pass gives you two options to unlock everything after you pay that $10. Either play 3 to 5 hours a week every week for the full season, or pay for tier skips. You can cut down on those hours if you specifically grind the challenges, but if you're just like playing mystery heroes or exclusively queuing for a single role in quick play, it'll take longer. In other words, if you play the way you want, you'll have to play more. If you have limited time, you have to play the way the game wants you to play. And if you play more than one of these games, like let's say you play Overwatch, but also Apex, but also Fortnite, and you get the battle passes in all of them, you have to try and balance your time between them. If you wanted to instantly get everything in the battle pass without having to play it, you can skip all 80 tiers for an additional $156, which kind of gives an indication that Blizzard recognizes there's a market for people with more money than time who still want them. If you do decide to play for them, you do have to play weekly to ensure you're getting those weekly challenges for the extra XP boosts. In fact, why not play daily to get even more of them? This is a tangent that deserves its own video someday, but it is legitimately pretty bullshit how many games have turned into just daily chore lists that you have to do if you want to keep up with them. Like, time is money. Games shouldn't be something you have to log into every day to complete your dailies, and it's bullshit that they're like this. But the reason they're like this is because it's kind of becoming necessary to keep games alive longer than they otherwise might be. Blizzard will let you buy your way through the battle pass, but it doesn't really want you to. It wants you to play for them, because that helps keep queue times down and average daily player rates up, maximizing the number of people vulnerable to getting trapped in the culture of classism that the game offers. Why does it make you play flex queue to get some challenges done? Why does it make you play 15 games each and at least 2 roles? Well, it's because it helps everyone get into games quicker if more people are incentivized to do so, and the quicker you get into a game, the more likely you are to stick around. Anyways, the rant about the chores thing is a thing for a different day. The important bit for this section is time. If you're working a full-time job, managing a family, getting groceries, maintaining your house, maybe playing a few other games, and trying to have a social life, a commitment of a few hours a week is actually kind of a lot. Someone getting to the end of the battle pass is a sign that they not only have a little bit of disposable income, but also a good amount of spare time, and that is another major indicator of class. Are the people in the oil field working 80 hours a week making bank? Absolutely. I've seen the skidoos, I've seen the trucks, I've seen all of that. Do they have the time to enjoy it though? Not really themselves, no. Being part of the upper class isn't just about having a lot of money, but the time and freedom to enjoy it. And if you ask any oil field parent, they'll tell you it really fucking sucks missing those special days with their families. They sacrifice and they work those jobs to try and support their families and give them the best possible lives, but they do so very much so at the expense of their own quality of life. And when the boom turns to a bust, like it always does, it's those workers left holding the bag. They're the ones left with debts they can't pay and no foreseeable return to prosperity while the oil companies take their tax credits, take 93% of the money from what's supposed to be owned by the people of Alberta, and then abandon their wells across the province for us to clean up with the remaining 7% that we did get. And if they wanted to, the executives of those companies can always make the decision to take time off, work from home, play some games, dick around, and not have to decide whether they should try and make it home for their son's first birthday and risk losing their job, or just hope that their partner or parents or siblings will get some good pictures of it that they can send you. I know that this is another one of my this video about Overwatch is secretly about this other thing videos, and whenever I do one of these, I inevitably get some "it's not that serious bro" comments. But I think what's important to recognize is that the culture of classism in Overwatch isn't that unique or different from the culture of classism that's everywhere around us. It is a core part of culture, society, and the economy. It's a defining factor of politics in terms of who gets listened to and who gets ignored. The culture of classism in Overwatch's cosmetics seems small and insignificant, but honestly, so does just about everything about our economic state of existence. For example, the United States government enacted a coup in Guatemala in 1954 because the Arbenz government got in the way of the United Fruit Company, making more money than the entire country of Guatemala's revenues just from selling bananas. If you didn't know, this sort of thing is where the term Banana Republic comes from. It describes how, after the introduction of the banana in the United States, countries like Honduras and Guatemala were functionally subjugated by fruit companies. It was the Cuyamel Fruit Company in Honduras and the United Fruit Company, now named Chiquita, in Guatemala that overthrew their democratically elected governments, all so they could make more money from selling fucking bananas. A profound amount of disease, death, and suffering was inflicted on indigenous peoples across the entirety of what is now Canada, in large part because Europeans just fucking loved beaver skin hats. And once beaver skin hats fell out of fashion, a lot of indigenous people were left holding the bag at best and forced into unjust treaties, reserves, and residential schools at worst. Bring it back to Overwatch, don't forget, the people working for Blizzard still aren't being treated well. CEO and other executives are, because they'll get millions and millions of dollars while illegally union busting to ensure their overworked, abused employees can't stand up for themselves, and spending their millions of dollars lobbying the government to let them get away with it. All of the suffering we've heard of from Blizzard over the last few years, all the crunch, all the workplace harassment, all the abuse, was in service of a company putting out a video game, or several video games, and fun skins for people to wear in those video games. All to capitalize on the tensions that exist between the haves and have-nots among their customers to make even more money, all the while not even cutting in the actual workers on the product. The reason we're talking about Overwatch here is because it's just a really distilled version of the absurd state of things when it comes to class. It's real-life millionaires taking advantage of the desire to be one of the haves and the fear of being one of the have-nots in the new digital world. And again, don't forget, Blizzard is turning a profit. The salaries of everyone working there are included in the expenses that are subtracted from revenues to determine the profit, and that includes the insanely high salaries of their executives. Profit is all that shit that's sitting on the top that doesn't go to the people who make the pre-skins in Overwatch, many of whom are struggling just as much as anyone else with the cost of living crisis. And to be clear, in the global scale of things, this is very much so not the worst case scenario. The profits of clothing companies are sitting on top rather than going to the child laborers working in sweatshops in Pakistan. And the profits of tech companies are sitting on top rather than going to the slave laborers mining lithium in Bolivia for batteries while the US enacts yet another South American coup to try and protect their interests. Like, Tim Cook is going on Dua Lipa's podcast to proudly proclaim that none of the cobalt in the current generation of Apple Watches was produced with child labor, and that they're trying to get there with the rest of their product line. But surely the man with a net worth of $1.9 billion fucking dollars could afford to take the hit and cover the cost of hiring adults to mine cobalt in safe conditions. None of this needs to be the way it is. Absolutely none of it. And we all know it sucks. Like, none of us are getting off on the idea of our phones being the product of immense suffering from people who built it on behalf of rich assholes in California taking all the profits. Humans are social creatures who desperately want to be part of an in-group. It's part of our nature, and frankly, it's kind of an inherently good part. It's what allows us to bond together in hard times and help each other. None of us wants to look like the asshole who refused to help, and all of us know that we will likely one day need that help. The exceptions are the people with enough wealth, enough power, enough social status, and enough class to not have to worry about whether or not we want to help them because they know we need the resources they have control over. The Starbucks CEO can mistreat his workers all he wants because he knows they still need the money that job provides even with how much he's skimming off the top. But the Starbucks barista can't afford for anyone above them, the CEO, executives, or just local management, to dislike them too much for taking off too many days, or they might just get fired. These executives exploit our desire to be part of the in-group by locking the in-group behind a paywall that's just high enough to make it exclusive, but just low enough that you can become part of the in-group for only $20. And that's not that much, is it? And every week there's more chances to become part of the in-group. You can afford to do it once in a while as a treat, right? You've got 3 spare hours a week per game to spend grinding through chores as challenges don't even work properly to get enough experience to unlock everything you paid for in the battle passes, right? Overwatch's cosmetics don't really create a culture of classism as much as they just reproduce the same shitty system that exists in every other aspect of our lives. And the solution is for the system to not exist. However, if you do not have the resources of an early to mid 20th century fruit company and are not prepared to begin overthrowing the system to meet your needs, you can at least focus on not letting it get to you. It feels stupid to say, but also, speaking from experience, when you're broke, it feels like you are just constantly being reminded of the ways in which you're just not able to do what everyone else is doing. And it does help to counter that narrative in your own head, even if you can't change it for everyone else. The constant feeling of being left out will get to you if you don't consciously convince yourself that the feeling is artificial. And it is. It isn't real. You're not really in an out group if you can't afford an Overwatch skin. You're not really not part of the communities you're in. And you're not doing something wrong just because you don't have a bunch of disposable time and or income. If you can buy the cosmetics, you do you. It's your money, it's your time. But just like how it's stupid to let an expensive shirt or purse or car make you think you're better than the person in a Walmart shirt with a knockoff bag and a beater of a car, it's stupid to let these things make you think you're better than other people just because you're holding on to financial stability with 2 fingers instead of 1. Anyways, on that optimistic note, that's where this video is going to end. Thank you very much for watching, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you enjoyed this Members' Choice video. Like I said at the beginning, every month my channel members get to pick a video topic for me to talk about, and next month's topics are especially exciting because they feature some viewer submissions. My second and third place Donathon donors each got to pick a topic to add to the polls, and they're being joined by 3 returning topics from past months. First, Cyberpunk 2077, the importance of understanding your genre. A topic that's appeared a couple times in past months, looking into how Cyberpunk 2077 missed the mark on the important themes of its genre in a way that undermined its narrative. Next, there's I'm Not Toxic, I'm a Nerd, the Liz Lemons of Overwatch. Another returning topic. This one focused on how nerds, non-derogatory, have often internalized being the underdog to the extent that they fail to see when they're being the bully. Then we have why people learn the wrong lessons from good data, a topic from last month that would focus on why data is so hard to interpret in terms of what actual lessons can be learned from it, and how Overwatch's statistics can be both technically accurate and deeply misleading about what went wrong or how to fix it. Then there's how video games distort people's perceptions of real-world resources. One of the 2 Donathon reward topics, this was suggested by David Demantoid and would involve conducting a study similar to the one from the Dunning-Kruger video, but this time about how certain video games affect people's perceptions of precious metals, gems, and resources, and Drag Queens, VTubers, and Entertainment as Performance. Our second Donathon reward topic, this one was suggested by Puppo Losfeld. It'd get into what it means when entertainment is being performed through a character that's explicitly a facade to all parties, and how that affects how we interpret it. The next Members' Choice poll opens on December 1st and will be coming out right around Christmas. The first round will run for a week between all 5 topics, with the top 2 moving on to a runoff vote. Memberships are $5 a month and are honestly a huge part of why I'm able to keep doing this. Thank you again to all my channel members. MiniQ, Olesp, Cage the Orc, Fish Toast, Kirby PPG, Alex Stone, Nemo the Survivor, Destiny, Connor, Yoshi of the Wire, It's Peggy BTW, Catlover192, Sourdough, Illuma Riley, Venus, Monkey12 Ninja, Cadence, Dem, V, and The Leathers. Whether you're a member, a subscriber, or you just stop by to watch a video, thank you very much, and I hope I'll see you around again soon.